Hi guys, welcome to Cricket Fan Zone. So we have a new show for you today called Fan Memories, where we are trying to relive great cricketing memories of different fans across the country. And today I have Mr. Rahul Sadagopan, who's my brother, my cousin, and who's also the son of Kolkata, the second most popular person in Kolkata after Ganguly. So we're just going to talk with him. So hi Rahul. Mm.
Hi Adi, thank you for having me. I think that's a lofty intro you've given me, calling me second most important after Ganguly. That's definitely not
At
true.
least to me, at least to me, you're the second most popular person for me from Kolkata, right? So just to give an intro about Rahul, Rahul is my cousin, as I told you, but Rahul is like born and bred in Kolkata, a true Bengali, and he's part Tamil and part Bengali. That's a different story for another day. But again, a cricket nut like me, like us, who has played cricket at different levels, and he has played for the Arun Lal Cricket Academy, and was like, if not for Ganguly, he should have played for the Indian team. So Rahul, just reliving those memories. So what was your earliest cricketing memory, like when you started? Why you started? Why do you love the game so much?
Earliest cricketing memory would probably go back to the time when I was actually not actively watching the sport. It was as a little kid, a toddler. I remember having this notebook which had Kapil Dev lifting the World Cup at the Lord's balcony as the cover.
Wow.
And that was a prized possession of mine. I had that for the longest time. I think even till when I went to college, it might possibly still be there at my Kolkata house. I'm not too sure, but that was a prized possession. And I used to remember like my dad and my grandfather and all talking about how Kapil Dev had inspired this whole new generation and how we were the underdogs in that World Cup and how we lifted that World Cup. So growing up, I used to keep hearing these stories, and Kapil Dev was a name that I was very familiar with, and he was like an inspiration for me. But the earliest cricketing memory that I have is probably 92 when India was 91, 92 when India during Australia. And then so that World Cup is when I actually started watching cricket in all seriousness. So that was probably when I was about like 9 years old. So that's my earliest cricketing memory of like watching it as a fan. That's when it started.
I think that was the first one which got like widely televised in India, right? And I think they're also wearing the colored clothes till '87. I think they were wearing plain whites, and that was such a vivid memory. Even as a youngster, for me, I'm a bit later I started watching cricket, but those colored clothes, and especially the India jersey, right? The dark blue or black, I guess, and that was such an attractive thing for me. And so 92, I think that was kind of the end of Kapil Dev and the start of the next superstar, right? Sachin Tendulkar started playing there.
That
So
is absolutely correct. And after Kapil Dev, and pretty much till date, Sachin is like the biggest star that I kind of look up to. So once Kapil retired, it was time to look for a new inspiratory figure, and that's when Sachin kind of galvanized the whole nation. So no surprises there. He was my biggest superstar during my formative years.
right, and there used to be this very famous poster, right, with Kapil Dev holding Sachin as a young
Yes,
Sachin,
yes.
and then this senior statesman Kapil Dev holding that poster used to be famous. I think it came free with one of those sports stars or magazines or Boost. They were
Yeah,
the models, I get, for Boost.
yeah. They did a commercial for Boost, and the poster became famous after that. Sportstar reminds me, I used to that used to be a prized possession. Like every
Right.
single week, like I used to collect like Sportstar and the posters.
Yeah.
Then we used to have these placards like on the lines of the WWE cards. We
Hmm.
used to have like a series for cricketers as well. I still have those in my Kolkata home, so that used to be a prized possession as a kid as well.
Yeah. Poignant. And so that is like, as a fan, when you start watching cricket, you will start liking it. So when did you like start taking it seriously? Like you started playing as a player, right? You wanted to become a cricketer. So when was that like?
So we used to always play in our building. Like we had kids of the same age. There used to be a cousin of mine who was elder to me, and then there were a couple of boys who were younger to me. And then I had a lot of friends in the neighborhood who were kind of my age. So we
Hmm.
used to play pretty much like gully cricket kinds every single day with like those rubber balls and the rubber dues balls, then tennis
Yeah.
balls. That's how the cricketing journey started. And I remember my father was trying to get get me to join a tennis club, which was right next to our house. And I was very adamant that I don't want to play tennis. I only want to play cricket. I really like cricket. And if you have to get me to join some club, I would rather join a cricket club. So that was the initial conversation that was taking place. But I don't remember why, but they weren't too keen on me joining a cricket club. So that got pushed out for maybe a year or two. I think when I joined a cricket club, it was probably 96 or 97. I'm not too sure. I don't remember the exact time frame. But yeah, that was around the time when I probably enrolled into a cricket club. But I was a very happy-go-lucky kind of a fellow, right? Like I used to just go, I wasn't the most gifted cricketer, to be honest.
Right.
But I used to just enjoy playing the sport so much. And going to the club, it was like my outlet. Basically, maybe anything to stay away from studies. That's what probably excited me the most. But going to the club, that's where kind of fitness got into my life as well.
Right.
And that really excited me, like doing all those freehand exercises, getting that discipline going, and then coming across other players, like forming a team, playing for a club. That got me going and got me excited about the game. So those were kind of the early memories that I have. But to answer your question, it was probably around maybe 96 after the World Cup. Maybe around that time is when I probably started playing the game like actively.
So this was after that heartbreak match versus Sri Lanka in Eden Gardens that we had semi-finals, right? Were you there, like at the ground, or was that too early?
No. I actually started watching cricket matches at the Eden. The first match, in fact, that I watched was 93, the Hero Cup. I don't know whether you remember that.
Yeah.
But this was India versus
Is
South
this
Africa.
Is this where Anil Kumble took that 6 for 12 or something? That
was the final. I'm talking about the semi-final where Sachin had bowled the last over against South Africa.
He contained. Yeah.
Right.
3 runs or something.
Correct. He won by 3 runs. So that was a semi-final match of the Hero Cup tournament. And I remember that very vividly because it was the first, I think it was CAB, Cricket Association of Bengal's, I think, Diamond Jubilee or something of that sort. And it was the first match to be held under floodlights at the Eden Gardens.
Oh, wow.
And it was the India-South Africa semi-final. And I remember as a kid being there at the stadium. That was my first live experience as a fan in a stadium. And I remember enjoying those chicken rolls, watching the match. And when it came down to the last over, this little boy in me, I was chanting out Kapil's name because I wanted him to pull the last over. Because as I told you, like he was my inspiratory figure at that point in time. And then there was this discussion in that last over when Azharuddin called up Kapil. I think there was Prabhakar probably, and there was Sachin in that whole huddle. And then Kapil backed off, and then Sachin took the ball. Like he literally snatched the ball from Azhar, and he went ahead and bowled the last over. And the roar that went around the stadium, that memory is still etched in my mind. That was my first experience watching a match at the Eden. 96 World Cup, I managed to get the tickets for the opening ceremony, which was in Kolkata, which I don't know if you remember, but it was like a massive flop show kind of a thing, because there was supposed to be these like massive laser lights and all, and things didn't kind of go as per plan, but it was still a big event back in the day. It was huge for India to be hosting the World Cup. India was just kind of opening up. It was becoming like a global economic, not a superpower, but it was opening up its economy. Sachin was becoming a big star. Brand endorsements. So that World Cup really kind of changed the face of cricket in India, really.
Right.
And I didn't get tickets for the semi-final. Fortunately or unfortunately, I was watching
from
home. Yeah. So I was watching that game from home, and I remember the heartbreak. Like when Sachin was batting.
Who wants to pay money to watch Kambli cry? Oh, that was I mean, and eventually we lost to the champions, so we can't complain. It's a fantastic
side. When Sachin was batting, I think he got 65 or so before he got out. There seemed to be no devils in the pitch. As soon as he got out,
that's the story of 90s, right? So Sachin gets out and you switch off the TV and go back, do your homework or whatever. So 96 again, such a vivid memory as a World Cup. And he was the top scorer, right? 537 something he scored. And he was devastating. That was the start of his peak. And vivid memory that. So, I mean, talking about Kolkata and cricket, I cannot not talk about the Prince, the Maharaj as they call him, Sourav Ganguly. And he also started in 96 in Lords, right? So what was your first memory of Ganguly? I don't think Kolkata had a big hero like that in cricket, right? Before, at least from Bengal. Probably interesting cricketers were there, but I don't think such a larger than life figure came from Kolkata. What was your first memory of Dada?
First memory, Dada obviously has to go back to 96 only, though he had made his debut in 92 in that same Austria tour that I was referencing.
Yeah.
But he came to prominence with that debut 100 at Lord's, right? So that is my first memory of Dada when he kind of broke into the scene and broke down the doors. But before Dada, there were quite a few famous players from Bengal. There was Pankaj Roy, obviously, who'd made it big at the international level. But that was way back 1955.
He had the opening record, right, for the first wicket.
Venu Mankad and Pankaj Roy. But after that, there was kind of a lull. There used to be like regional politics. Players didn't really make it big. Arun Lal probably came close. He was there for a brief period. He played 16 test matches, but he didn't really.
Subrata Banerjee, I think, came.
Subrata Banerjee was there for a brief while. And Saurav's elder brother, Snehashish Ganguly, in the cricketing circles was widely touted to be the more talented brother, in Bengal at least. But Ganguly kind of kicked on and made it big, while Snehashish was stuck at the Bengal level only. He didn't kick on to become an international star. But yes, after Ganguly went on and became the Indian captain, even before that, he was already like a celebratory figure in Bengal. But once he took up that leadership role and captained India, and especially after the match fixing controversy, like he was a prince of Kolkata, as Geoffrey Boycott had coined him. But thereafter, he was literally the king of Kolkata. Like there was no one, in fact, till date, there's probably no one more important than Dada in Kolkata.
So like, what was your first memory of watching him live? Like, did you see him in person? Did you ever get to do an autograph or something, or you have a photo? Or how?
So I actually had the good fortune of watching him live. Like he used to come. So at I used to, as I mentioned, I used to play for Bonvita Cricket Academy, which was the first cricket academy set up by Arun Lal in Kolkata. And when I was playing for that club, the Bengal team would come and practice over there because the Bengal team's fitness trainer was also a fitness trainer at our club. So the Bengal team would come and practice, and we used to practice kind of alongside them early in the morning. And sometimes the net sessions used to take place at our club, right? And I remember watching Ganguly bat in the nets, and so I was in the net right beside Ganguly, so I had the pleasure of watching him like literally 2 feet away from me.
So this is like which year? Which year of this?
This would probably be 99, I guess. 98, 99. I don't remember the exact time.
Before the World Cup, maybe, right? Before the World Cup, maybe.
Which World Cup?
England World Cup, right? 99. So.
Maybe before the World Cup. I don't exactly remember the time. But yeah, around about that time, I guess. 1999. I don't remember the exact timeline, to be honest. But Dada was there. And I remember like this net bowler, he came and bowled, and effortless, like the ball was like sailing out of the... So where we used to have the nets, there was a ground right over there where we used to have our club matches, right? And from the nets, he easily soared the ball like into the ground. It was that effortless, like pure timing, pure grace. So it was a pleasure to see him live up front. But I wasn't that kind of a fanboy because by that time I was kind of trying to pursue cricket in seriousness. So though Dada was there, the Bengal players were there, though Arun Lal was kind of a coach for us, I never really sought out any of their autographs. So that autograph fanboy stage had gone by before that. When as a kid, my dad used to work with the Taj Group of hotels, right? So till the 96 World Cup, I used to be that crazy autograph-seeking fanboy, and I used to go and seek autographs, and that's when I got the autographs of Oscar, Kapil Dev, Viv Richards, Garfield, all of those players. But after that 96 World Cup, when I started playing the game, and when I had access to these Bengal players coming to our club, it was more about trying to make it like a professional in the game. So I didn't really seek out autographs, but I would watch them from close quarters.
Fantastic. And I think 99 is when he scored that 183, right, for Sri Lanka in Taunton. Yeah, that was like 96 to around 2000. That was Dada's peak. I remember he used to score all these big hundreds in finals, Independence Cup and all that, right? So versus Pakistan, and he used to be sharing the burden with Sachin after a long time. So again, like you told that he became captain around that terrible time in cricket, right? This match fixing broke, and a lot of these players got caught, and he took over the Indian team at a very turbulent time. And Sachin had some difficulty in captaincy. So when Dada became captain, like, did you have any memory of it? What were your expectations when he became a captain, or were there any expectations? I remember like losing a lot of hope around that 99 2000 time, and that you just felt heartbroken. Especially your dads. My dad just went bonkers. Like, uske baad he really didn't watch cricket seriously after match fixing. And even till today, he doesn't take it seriously. And so that was the impact of match fixing. But for younger ones like us, we were still watching. So still Sachin was
Right.
there. So we had hope. So like, you remember like Dada becoming captain? Did you have any thoughts around the time?
So to be honest, the earliest memories of that match fixing controversy, I was really surprised and in a way heartbroken that Hansi Cronje came out in the open and he confessed, right? That was a big shocker. Like I had never expected Hansi Cronje of all people
He
to
used to be a hero, like spirit of the game and all that. So
exactly, like, and he was such a well-liked person in the cricketing circles. But at least to his credit, he came out and he confessed and he opened up. Unfortunately, he passed away shortly after that. So that was a big shocker with the whole match fixing controversy. When it came to India, there were certain players that people would always kind of had their doubts on in terms of possibly being involved in match fixing. But you had the likes of Sachin, Saurav, Kumble, Dravid, Srinath. These were players that even if someone took their names, you would have never believed it, right? Because you could see the passion when they would go out and represent the country. So as long as Sachin was there, like you rightly said, as a youngster, I didn't really care much about match fixing. I knew that we would come out of it eventually. So in terms of captaincy, I think Jadeja was kind of Ajay Jadeja was one of the front runners at that time. Before this whole match fixing saga kind of broke up, he was also getting a few opportunities to captain, and with fairly decent success as well. The few matches that he captained, he was doing fairly well, and he was a cricketer that was widely regarded like with street smart kind of brain.
And he was a decent captain for Rajasthan also. I remember later.
After that was this, much later. After he came back.
And even when he does commentary on, he always like makes sense.
Yes. But that was he was being looked up as a captain, but then he got implicated in the whole match fixing saga. Then there were very few options. Sachin was not too keen on becoming captain. So the names at that point in time, like Ganguly was maybe a left field choice, but it turned out to be the right choice eventually. So I didn't have too many expectations. Being in Bengal, it was like a huge celebration, obviously, like the son of the soil had gone on to become captain, which no one would have imagined a decade back. No one would have thought of. So it was a huge celebrity moment in Bengal. And that's when, like I said, like from Prince, he literally became king overnight. And it was like a huge celebration. But I was a massive Sachin fan. So I was kind of indifferent. It didn't make much of a difference to me that, okay, Dada is captain. I was just interested in the sport more than individuals. If there was an individual, it was Sachin for me. That's it.
Yeah. Now I understand, like from this conversation, right? Like Sachin was this moral compass for the whole nation and the team. And now actually, now I value his presence more now. I didn't really think of that thing, like why you didn't feel the hurt so much. Even now I understand, like subconsciously, you know that Sachin is still there. And Sachin was kind of becoming larger than India or cricket, right? Like, it was Sachin. You watched the game for that man. So, yeah. And Dada taking over, I think around that time is when John Wright also started his coaching stint, right? I think earlier was it Kapil who was the coach, I guess, and I remember him coaching for some of the tournaments.
Kapil was coach when Sachin was captain. That was a miserable partnership. Then Anshuman Gaikwad came into the picture.
Gaikwad, just the Sharjah. I still remember him sitting there in dressing room.
Yeah. And after that, like I think the partnership made in heaven was John Wright and Saurav. It just worked wonders for Indian cricket. And actually, talking about match fixing, I don't know how true the story is, but it gets told and shared in social media circles a lot. There was apparently like Sachin and Saurav having a discussion before a match that there is news that this match is fixed, and Sachin and Saurav then decided that we'll take it upon ourselves. We won't lose a wicket and we win the game. And this is probably a game in Sharjah where they didn't lose the wicket and India won by 10 wickets and both of them probably scored hundreds.
Yeah, I think this was Zimbabwe, I guess. That's when they had this huge partnership. Coca-Cola Trophy. When Sachin was smashing Henry Olonga, right? Like that was a very famous match. But I didn't know this backstory. Shocking. So could be possible because they stopped playing in Sharjah just for this reason, right? Because of the match fixing and all that. That's why India stopped playing them. And Yeah, and I won't be surprised. And I mean, thank God we had like gentlemen like this who did the transition from that phase, right? So the series we wanted to always discuss is 2001 when Australia came to India after I think winning 16, 17 in a row. I think after Mumbai,
15.
right?
We won
So
15
so
in a row when they came to India.
yeah, and that was like a champion team at its peak.
Oh, yeah.
They dethroned West Indies in 1995 under Mark Taylor, I guess, and after that, it was Australia's domination had started. And by 2001, they had like a phenomenal side. And even though Hayden was a bit relatively new, we can say, but that was the series he defined himself. And any team that has Gilchrist coming at 7 is the scariest team you can play. And so, any memories of when that series happened? Because I remember that series was just another series for me because it was not like touted to be this era defining series or one of the greatest test series ever. And you always knew that Australia kind of struggled in India with the spin and all that, and Sachin used to dominate them. But this time they were touted to just trample us because it was such a terrific side they had. And they had everyone like Gillespie, and they had McGrath, they had Vaughan, the whole attack was there. And so, any memories of that when that series happened? Did you have any expectation as such? It was just another series, right?
So by that time, I was like someone who was trying to play the game professionally, and I was a very avid cricket fan. I used to read up on stats, history books, everything, follow every series, no matter who's playing. Even if it's Kenya, Bangladesh, I would watch every single ball of those matches also. So Australia was a very strong side, like you mentioned. Gilchrist was fairly new. This was his 15th, like the 15 test matches prior to coming to India that they'd won. Those were Gilchrist's first 15 test matches, and he won every single one of them. So he was never part of a side that had lost a game, right? That was Adam Gilchrist, and he was beginning to form this name for himself. Matthew Hayden was kind of making a re-entry back into the side. He made his debut maybe 5-6 years back, but this was the series that went on to define him, and he went on to become a legend of the game. But if you look at that side, that Australian side, when it was traveling to India, even before the series started, Steve Waugh announced the famous words like, "This is our final frontier. We've won 15 test matches on the trot. It's now about winning in India, and we make it 18-0. That is what Steve Waugh had said before even stepping onto Indian shores. And you look at the lineup, you had Michael Slater, you had Matthew Hayden, then you had Justin Langer at 3, you had Ricky Ponting, Marquardt, Steve Waugh, Adam Gilchrist, and then the bowlers. You had Shane Warne, Gillespie, McGrath, there was Kasparovich, and there was this guy, Damien Fleming. Right, and they had this.
Fleming, did he play the test matches? I don't think so.
He played the first test match in Mumbai, which we lost badly inside 3 days. So he played the first test match. Second test match in Kolkata, Kasparovich replaced him. And the last test match in Chennai, they had this off spinner, Colin Miller.
Funky Miller. Yes.
Yeah, Funky Miller. He came into the side in place of the fast bowler in the third test match. But Shane Warne played all 3 test matches. So there weren't any expectations because India was a relatively new team after this match-fixing controversy, new captain, Ganguly. We had no hopes really. Like it was like Australia winning 15 on the trot. I was just interested in seeing Sachin score more hundreds because the previous series, 98, was that huge battle between Sachin and Shane Warne, right? And I was just looking for an encore of that. And I was like, if Sachin can play, there is a chance that, okay, we might win. That was kind of the expectation that I had. But as a team, I had no hopes of us like competing. It was just like Sachin working his magic, and maybe we can win a game or 2 here and there. Hope for the best kind of a thing. But on paper and with the kind of history that was there, Australia were by far the favorites. And that's how the series started. First test match we lost within 3 days. Hayden scored a century. Gilchrist, I think Australia was in a spot of bother. They'd lost 5 wickets. And then Gilchrist came and hammered us all over the ground and scored a quick fire 100. And we lost the game in 3 days. Though Sachin had played really well in that game. But
70
we lost
something, he scored 70 plus.
70 plus. And then
very fluent innings. I remember that innings to be very fluent. And also remember we didn't have the biggest weapon, right? We didn't have Anil Kumble in that series. And we didn't have Srinath also. The bowling attack was done by Zahir Khan, who was like a novice. And then Venkatesh Prasad, like who was okay. He had his days and he was not really like a champion bowler.
Actually, first test match, I think Srinath had played, if memory serves me right. And then I think he got injured or something. Kumble was already out of the series.
Yeah.
Srinath played the first test match. I think he got injured, and I think partnering was Ajit Agarkar, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So
I think Zach
both
and BKV Prasad came for the Kolkata test. That's what I remember.
it was Ganguly and Zach who opened. I don't think Prasad played that match. There was Venkatapati Raju. There was Harbhajan.
Right.
So this was Harbhajan's career-defining series, because I remember before the series, there was a lot of questions as to why Harbhajan was picked in the side. But Saurav Ganguly had put his foot down. And though being a new captain, that was one of the decisions that he had taken. Like, he backed Harbhajan to the hilt, insisted on Harbhajan playing, and got Harbhajan drafted into the side. I think first test match, Harbhajan picked up, I think, 7 wickets in the game or something like that.
Yeah.
Eden Garden's first innings, I think he picked up 7 wickets in that innings itself.
Yeah.
Second, he picked up 6 wickets and 13 wickets for the match. And
Right.
then Chennai test match, I think he picked up 8 wickets or so.
Yeah.
In that.
8 for 84, I think. Yeah. And so you actually are one of the few people who watched that match in the ground, right? Like, you went to the stadium and you were there for all 5 days, you said. So
yes, I was there for every single one.
So what was your feeling? What was your feeling when this India was about to follow one and Lakshman was batting with the tail? He was batting brilliantly. He scored some 59, I think, in that first innings. And he was just 12 boundaries hit in that innings, I remember. And everyone else was struggling. It was literally dead. And Australia had scored around, I think, 445 or something, I guess, after.
Right.
Steve Waugh did a rear guard century. Yes. And so it was dead, right? So what was your thought? Were you there when Lakshman was playing that first innings, that 59?
Yes. Like you mentioned, I was there for every single one of those 5 days. First day, I think Australia batted first in the first innings. He scored 450 odd, like you mentioned. Hayden, I think, got a 90 odd. He was batting beautifully again. He got out. Steve Waugh got a century. And India in the first innings, I think we got bundled out for 200 odd. And like you mentioned, Lakshman rear guard action with the tail 50 odd.
Yeah.
And he was unfortunate to come in at number 6.
Right.
Dravid, I remember, was having a torrid time in the lead up to that series. And in that series as well, he was hardly scoring runs. Like, he was there for a while at the wicket, but he was hardly scoring runs. He was having a tough time at number 3. Even Ganguly didn't get too many runs in that series, if memory serves me right. So we were down and out pretty much. Like, after the first 2 days, it was like expected we are going to get rolled over again in 3-4 days possibly. And then Steve Waugh took that famous call and enforced the follow-on. And that is when, again, a sharp bit of captaincy from Saurav. He pushed Lakshman up to number 3 and got Dravid back down to number 6.
Right.
And that changed the face of Indian cricket. And this was the series that then gave Indians the belief that they could compete in any situation and fight till the very end. And it went on to become the series that would define Ganguly as the leader, right?
Right.
And the one, like he's now famous for backing youngsters in the team, backing players that he believed in. This was the start of that.
Right.
Like, this was a series where he backed Harbhajan, right?
Right.
Later on, he would go on to back Yuvraj, Sehwag, Zach, all of these players.
Everyone,
everyone. But this was the start of that.
The whole lot.
Yeah. Lot, but this was a start. So as a fan, I was just going there for the experience of cricket, to watch a champion side in the Australians, and to watch special. Was my So that was my expectation into the game. What happened day 3, day 4 was pure magic. Like, no one could have anticipated it. Like, imagine in that sweltering heat, day 4, not losing a wicket, and both of them batting out the whole day, and they had these ice pack collars, like handkerchiefs around their necks.
Yeah.
And I think they were on drips by the end of the 4th day. Like, both of them had to be on drips, Lakshman and Dravid.
I think both were sick. I remember Lakshman saying it, or Dravid saying this. And Lakshman was sick, and he was not sick. He had some issues with the hamstring and all that. So he was crediting, I think, Andrew Lapis, I guess, or Gregory. So Andrew Lapis. So he credited him that I was there in the game because of that guy. And I think Dravid was also sick. They had some flu or some kind of thing, and they still played. I still vividly remember, and you lost hope and you went to school or something. So you came back, and then you through the day, like evening, you're saying these 2 players are still batting. Whole day you didn't have a wicket falling, right? And you're like, I haven't seen anything like that. It's like madness. Like, is this highlights? Like, no, this is live. It's happening right now. They really didn't get it for all 3 sessions. Facing McGrath, Vaughan, and that bowling attack, they didn't lose a wicket. So it was very surreal for us. So in the stadium, so gradually, so when you started watching these 2 bat, right? And that was also, Dravid came at a kind of a precarious situation. I mean, even if he had got out, it would have been another Lakshman century and India would have lost that match. So it was not like safe when Dravid also came, right? So how was the mood in the stadium? Because the highlights is crazy. Even when I watch it right now, the noise, right? And inside the stadium would have been like millionfold. So how was it like? So was the mood changing session by session?
So to give you a bit of background to this, before this test series, the preferred son of the soil for Eden Gardens was Mohammad Azharuddin, because he had a stellar track record at Eden Gardens, right? So Azharuddin in Eden and the fan following for Azhar at Eden was legendary. It was the stuff of legends, right? So this was probably one of the first series where India was playing without Azhar at Eden in the longest time. And we were looking for someone to step up to that. Any fan, even though Ganguly is like number one in Kolkata, and he was already number one in Kolkata during this series because of his exploits in the few years in the lead up to that. But Sachin, everyone has a soft corner for. So everyone wants Sachin to do well and score big. He hadn't really set Eden on fire till that time period. In this test match also, he failed. Right? This is when Lakshman had already had a couple of good innings before that at the Eden. But this was the innings that went on to define him, and he was the new Azharuddin for Eden. Because after that, his love story with Eden went on to kind of parallel what Azhar had in terms of track record at Eden, right?
Both from Hyderabad, so something.
Both from
yeah.
Magic wrists.
Yeah.
So as a fan, like people were probably looking for a replacement for Azhar to have that connect going as a fan watching it in the stadium, right? And everyone wanted Sachin to do well. Everyone obviously wanted Saurav to do well because he's the son of the soil. But both Saurav, I think, got a decent knock. He got about 40 odd. But we were 4 wickets down end of third day when Ganguly came in and Dravid came in that precarious situation. Lakshman had already scored 100 by the end of the third day. And we were on course to lose, right? But the whole perception on the ground, everyone knew that Australia is a champion side. So while I remember those days, there were no seats, right? It was like concrete slabs in the stadium. And hence, there was no limit to the number of people you could kind of fill into the stadium. We used to have anywhere between 80,000 to 100,000 people inside that stadium. So it was like a gladiator kind of, a full call. Right? And the noise in the stadium as a fan, it is unrivaled, right? Because we used to have these famous Mexican waves going around the stadium. And then even if a foreign player scores a century or picks up a 5-wicket haul or does a stunning bit of fielding, everyone would cheer and clap. In between, obviously, you know how fans are. They would obviously abuse the players. If some Indian player is doing something bad, they would obviously abuse the hell out of him. But that is part of the fan viewing experience. Right. But everyone kind of knows that this is a champion side that we are up against. And we just wanted our team to put up a fight because we'd gotten steamrolled in Mumbai. And the same story was panning out over here. We just wanted someone to step up and put up a fight. So the fact that Lakshman got 100, that kept the fans' hopes alive that, okay, at least something special is happening here. Even if we lose the game, let's put up a fight. That was the kind of sentiment in the ground. And given that we managed to survive day 3, we went into day 4. What I was surprised was day 4 again, all the spectators were back in the ground. Like though we were done and dusted for pretty much all counts. Then what started happening through the day was unreal, right? Because when every ball, every over, every hour, every session that you're playing out, it's giving hope, right?
Yeah.
And that's what life is also like. When you're down and out, you want to fight out, you want to come back up and stay the course.
Yeah.
Step by step. And that is what we saw panning out in front of our eyes. And when that was happening, like it gave us belief. So by the end of the first session on day 4, the spectators started believing, okay, maybe there's a chance that we might save this game.
Yeah.
But
I remember saving the game was the feeling for a long time. Yeah.
Exactly. No one thought about victory at that stage. It was unreal to think of a victory, right? So we were thinking, okay, there is a slim possibility we might save this game, possibly take it to day 5 and a miracle might happen. We might save the game. There was no question of thinking of a victory at that stage.
Right.
First session happened, lunch happened, tea happened, and then there was a gradual excitement building up. Like people were like, they couldn't believe what they were watching.
What's happening
here?
Yeah.
Exactly. And then when he got the double 100, and that's when like people are like, okay, we're watching something special over here. Dravid also, given the wretched form that he had, to battle it out. So they were fighting their own personal battles. They were fighting out the situation, fighting a strong Australian team. And that is what life is.
Up against everything. Yeah.
You want to see
I often cite that test match. Like I often just go and have a relook at it whenever I feel down or whenever I feel that the world is against me. Those kind of feelings happen, right? So I always remember this this resilience, and it was not like they're just batting for time or they're defending. They're scoring runs. They're scoring ton of runs actually, and it's like you're counter defending and you're counter attacking. So at the same time, it's like you're saving the test, trying to save the test match, but you're aggressive. So that conundrum always used to, because generally when you try to save a test match, you defend it out, right? But I don't know what hope they had or what was the strategy Lakshman had. At least that is his natural game. He's never been a big defender as such. So what to, if he had got out, say like flawless batting, he would have got at 120, 135. People would have started criticizing him, saying we could have saved the test match. He should not have been so aggressive, right? But that was like counter punch of the biggest notches. That was like Rocky Balboa hitting it from nowhere. So
absolutely the right balance. Rocky Balboa stuff. Out of nowhere.
That's like a knockout from when you're down and out, and from there you're hitting, right? So I always cite this test match, and I always remember it like whenever you feel down, you should counter punch, not just defend. Don't be defensive. So be aggressive and actually tackle it. So that day and that innings, I had posted recently on Facebook saying that this imagery of Lakshman and Dravid walking out after playing the day 4 without losing a wicket, I always see that image as a sign of hope. So amazing. It was more than a match. So.
Yeah, but for these two individuals, I think they had the self-belief as well, because I remember reading the story. I think it was Venkatapati Raju who said it in an interview. At the end of day 3, when Lakshman Dravid got back to the dressing room, Lakshman suddenly got up from his chair and said, "Guys, we can win this test match." At that point, it was like unreal, right? Because like 4 wickets down and Dravid and Lakshman batting. Yeah, Lakshman had gotten a century, but we were still trailing Australia by 20 odd runs heading into day 4. So there was no scope. Like no one even thought of victory at that stage. Even Raju was surprised. He was part of the playing 11.
Those days we had a tail longer than a dinosaur, right? It just it started after number 5 went its tail immediately.
Yeah.
And I think still Monge was the keeper. He was having a terrible time. Yeah.
Yes.
So day 4 is done, and then I think even on day 5 till Australia went to first session, I think the first wicket was lost at 74, right? Like it was quite a while before the fall happened. So you remember day 5? Like how was that memory?
So by the end of day 4, the fans in the stadium had started getting the belief that there is a slim chance that we're definitely saving this match. I mean, there's a good chance we're saving this match, but there's a slim chance that we might win this match as well. And we were hoping for like Lakshman to get a 100 and Dravid to get a 100, put up some quick runs, get those milestones, and then put Australia into bat. That was kind of the thinking, right? What happened day 5 was, I think Australia had adopted a very defensive plan in that first hour. They were bowling wide of the stump, set defensive field, so we weren't getting too many runs. And then Lakshman got out for 281, so he missed the 100. Dravid got run out, I think 180 odd. He missed his 100. So there was a disappointment, disappointing feeling among the fans in the stadium that the personal milestones didn't happen. And you know how Indian fans are like, though it's a team sport, individual milestones really matter. Right? And this would have been this was the first of its kind, like a 100 by an Indian. It had never been done before, right? But that didn't happen. Then we thought, now that these milestones are out of the way, the sentiment in the ground was we might as well declare and get Australia into bat. But Ganguly kind of prolonged the declaration a bit. And then we set them a target, and eventually the declaration came about. But we were really surprised by the Australian approach, because in those days, it was unreal to chase 300 plus scores, and that to try to go for a target on the last day of a test match, that on a turning track in India, right? We thought Australia would come out, just play out the day and go for a draw, right? That was the thinking. But the way Australia approached that innings, and that's credit to Steve Waugh and the belief that he instilled in the team, that no matter what situation, we will always gun for a victory first.
Right.
And the way Edos and Slater came out, they were all guns blazing. They put up that 70-odd partnership, and they were looking very comfortable, to be honest.
Right.
After that, Langer came out. He was looking in beautiful touch, I remember. I visualize this because I was there with my best friend. I don't know, you might have met him, Kaustav. We were thick as thieves, and we were watching it together at the stadium, and we were like, shit, it seems like Australia's going to go for this target.
Yeah.
We were like a bit worried with the approach that Australia did. But wickets started tumbling at regular intervals. Though Australia was maintaining a good run rate, we thought that, if wickets are tumbling, they'll probably shut shop and then go for the defensive approach. But that wasn't really happening. They still kept playing their shots. and then Sachin came in with that magic spell, and then so last session I think they still had about like 7 wickets remaining, if I remember, like 3 wickets at the time of tea. There was 7 wickets in hand, so we were all prepared for a draw, but we were very happy that we've come out unscathed in the sense that at least we're not losing this match. By that time, we were sure we're not losing the match. And we thought that, okay, we'll save this match. There was no question of victory even then. After tea, when Sachin kind of came up and picked up those 3 wickets, that got the entire stadium like wild. And then Harbhajan was picking wickets from the other side. And it was almost like the umpires were ready to pick up their fingers, like any appeal for LBW, and the umpire would straight away lift his finger.
I still remember the last one which the umpire gave for McGrath, right? You felt that he raised the finger before the ball went to the batsman. Right? Yeah. Hi, and then out like that. Like, I still remember that, man. McGrath like couldn't process the whole thing. He still stood there saying that was out actually. And again, talking about Sachin, right? Such a champion player. Forget about just the batting. We just recalled about the 93 thing where he did the last over. And he did this in Kolkata, and he did this in Adelaide also, if you remember, right? When Dravid won that match for us. He was the one who picked up Damien Martin, Steve Waugh, and all that. In that Adelaide aspect. His bowling always had something. He always used to come and do some magic and win us matches. It's a very underrated aspect which people don't talk about Sachin. That what he does with the ball. So when the last wicket fell, can you describe me the noise? How was it?
Forget about the noise in the stadium. Like I remember what had happened was, so since there were no seats, we used to sit on these concrete slabs, and imagine there wasn't even proper shading in that time. So under that strong sunshine, we were all sitting there like sunburnt, really sweating away. And the tradition at Eden Gardens during those days was the paper that you used to put out on the concrete slabs. At the end of the match, people would take up those papers and light like a matchstick, set it on fire, and you had these marks. So as soon as that happened, there were like Mexican waves obviously happening through the course of the day, unheard of like noise through the day. Whenever wickets were falling, like everyone just jumped up in arms and screaming and hugging each other in the stands. So it was unreal. And then when that happened, like instantly people would like light up the mashals, and it was like celebratory fire, and the noise was deafening in the stadium. And I was there with my best friend. We were like celebrating like crazy and mad, like high-fiving each other, shouting at the top of our voice, like lungs, screaming our lungs out literally. After the match got over, we remember dashing with the India flag to the metro station. And the metro station was also full madness. Like people in the metro station are screaming. In the metro train, they're like running up and down the bogies with the India flag. It was madness all around it. Like India had won the World Cup, and people were like celebrating like mad on the streets, in the stadium, in metros, buses, everywhere. It was that kind of like pandemonium, literally. But it was magic. It was unreal to kind of be a part of that live at the stadium, and then celebrate with friends right after the match. So it was unreal.
That's fascinating. What happens outside is never captured, right? So you always talk about the stadium and all that. I think City would have gone mad that day. And still very there for the whole presentation and all that, like Ganguly.
Not a single minute or second we would look to miss. We were there like from start to finish, every single ball, stay back for the presentation, everything. Like we were such diehard, maniacal fans of the game.
Right. So I think from there, I think you had, then from that victory, you always think that you can win the next match. Like if you can win from here, you can win from anywhere, right? So my memory of that match when it came to Chennai was that people are a bit more confident. They were looking for a win from the moment. And that was the whole thing, right? Like if you can come back from Kolkata, that follow on, you can go ahead and win whatever game, right? You cannot beat that side, that kind of confidence. And Steve Waugh, like, by defining it as the final frontier, he made it more important than people actually took it for, right? Like he gave perspective to the Indian team also, right? They would have said, okay, this guy considered this as a final frontier, then let's play it like one. Because I remember, like, do you remember this Tony Greig's very infamous comment about groveling to the West Indian team, right? When said that the West Indies players will, if I get on top of them, they're going to grovel. And he was also a cricketer from South Africa, right? And he had all these apartheid history and all that. Not him, but he's coming from a country which had that history. And that drove the West Indian team into madness, right? So, and they just steamrolled them. Similar thing happened here also, right? I would feel, because when you say that's the final frontier, because I don't think any Indian team was thinking this was like Australia is taking it this seriously. And calling it a frontier or any of those things. So thanks to Steve also for that to make it such an important series, right?
Yeah. In those days, we never had any social media or anything, right? Like, so you had to just bank on like TV news interviews and what you read in the newspapers. What emerged much later when Steve Waugh kind of spoke about it was how Ganguly had rubbed him the wrong way through the course of the series. So even in the Kolkata Test match, like Eden was like his home ground, Ganguly deliberately came late for the toss, and that really irked Steve Waugh because he was having to stand in the heat waiting for Ganguly to arrive. He didn't arrive on time, and that kind of pissed Steve Waugh off. So these subtle things that Ganguly did as a captain just to rub people the wrong way and get them worked, and then inspire the team in a manner that gets them to fight and give it back to the opposition. Because till that time, till Ganguly became captain, Indian team was always a bunch of nice guys, right? We never really gave it back. We never got into a fight. People would abuse us. In fact, I have this memory of in Australia, I think it was, where Srinath had bowled a bouncer to Ponting and it hit him in the face. And Srinath went to check in on him and Ponting abused the shit out of him.
Right.
It was like so surprising. Like the batsman got hit, bowler is checking, and the batsman is abusing the bowler.
Yeah.
And Srinath
felt embarrassed, I guess, getting hit by an Indian fast bowler. So.
Absolutely, yeah. But that was the kind of approach.
And then they have been hitting them ever since then. So I think now they got used to it. So yeah, I mean, I remember that aggressive streak. Yes, that was the start, and I mean, he was a guy who you could even go behind. You can go to war with him. So that was the kind of a leader he was. I think he like transformed the whole country. Like he took 1 billion people to the ground, not like 11 players. So I always felt like I am playing. When Ganguly is captaining, you feel that you are on the field. Like you have to do some strategy. You have to change. And that team, the way they connected with the fans also, I don't think that has transitioned ever since. Like Dhoni was a bit of a different captain, and now Kohli is a bit of a different captain, but you never had this heart-to-heart connection. Probably the sides of Dhoni and Kohli, I won't say better, are far more athletic and far more aggressive or whatever you may call, but I always resonated more with Ganguly's team. You felt like it's your team. It's like you felt that you are part of the team. So fascinating, and that started the whole thing, right? For Indian cricket, I would say that was a start, and then from there, whatever victory you have done, you can actually hark it back to that and saying that was the start of it.
That was the start, yeah. Those were the seeds of what we are seeing today. Like today, India is one of the superpowers in the game, but that was probably the starting point.
Yeah, I think that's when they started respecting India as a team. They gave a full series, the 4 test matches, and the next one, 2003, also we did really well. 1-1. Yeah, that was Steve's last one. So, anyway, amazing, fascinating memory. I mean, to relive it with someone there, that's a different thing. And so, I think we got a rare experience of talking to someone who was on the ground. So, amazing. Thank you for the story, Rahul. And fascinating reliving that with you. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation. So, what are your thoughts?
No, it was lovely, like just kind of reliving those memories, because these are memories that are etched in your mind, right? And even today, like whenever I catch up with like Costa, who's my best buddy, like we are diehard fans, and we both had this love for Sachin, and we used to be like avid fanatics of the game, following every ball, every series. Every time we were on the phone, we discussed cricket.
Yeah.
We have this so fan following, right? We used to have this, who is better, Sachin or Dravid, this kind of debate. But as we grew up, we realized that it doesn't really matter. Like, end of the day, they are just playing for the same team, and whoever scores, it's in our interest. So
no. I am still partisan to Sachin. Whatever you try to do, you can't. Like even now, when someone does the Sachin and Lara debate, I just Sachin just don't talk anything else. So he is like,
but I think at the level, I think all of us would agree that everyone is great in their own right.
Yeah. And as you grow older, you see the value of Dravid and Lakshman and see what they have done. So especially Dravid.
The kind of connect that Sachin got going for the nation, like giving relief to a nation when all was lost, that kind of connect, like obviously there might be better players. Like if you look at someone like Kohli and all, who's got a stellar record in chasing down targets.
I disagree. I disagree. Yeah. But anyway, I got your point. I think he started it. He started that whole journey of the liberalization, and Sachin, everything came together. So it's a new India, and he was also one of the most amazingly marketed sports athletes, along with Michael Jordan and all that. So Sachin it's a larger story. He's not just a cricketer. So That's why I don't compare him with, even Brian Lara says that, right? He doesn't compare himself because he's larger than the game. He took the game to everywhere, and also his conduct as a person, the way he conducted his life, right? That's another thing. I mean, being a superstar, you could have been anything else. So that's also another thing. So anyway, thank you again. Beautiful reliving this with you, and thank you for joining us. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Fan memories is all about this. People who are at the ground who supported, and we wanted to capture that memory of these matches, because you always hear it from the broadcasters, and this is what the fans go through. And so thank you for listening to us. Please subscribe to our channel, and keep waiting for more content like this. We keep trying to do different things for you. So thank you for joining us today. Again, thank you, Rahul. Thanks.
Thank you, Adi. Pleasure having me. So my pleasure being there. Thank you.
Awesome.
Take care. Bye.